Welcome back to the 8th episode of Texas A&M Aggies Live. I'm your host, Cameron Honesty. I am joined today by Cannon Torres for, I don't know what time, it's like fourth or fifth time, which is awesome, as always. We're entering today. We both woke up this morning to the big news. I mean, because it's been, I just want to, preclude that by saying it hasn't been the greatest time for Aggie athletics. And it's been kind of a downturn over the last 2 weeks of everything we've been dealing with the baseball season, the softball season ending, and obviously the baseball team not being selected in the NCAA tournament on Monday. But switching back to basketball, Bucky McMillan, there was a pause there. I think the last time we actually talked, there were a couple more commitments that came down the chute. And I believe what came first was the commitment by Pop Isaacs from Creighton, who also played at Texas Tech. I think if you are a college basketball fan, you know Pop Isaacs very well, one of the best point guards in the country, and has had a connection to Texas A&M for a while. I think going back to Buzz Williams, there's always a discussion in various off seasons of, hey, should Buzz Williams reach out, especially when he was going to transfer from Texas Tech before obviously committing to Creighton. One of the best shooters, went down with, I believe, is a season-ending leg injury. Yes. And I do remember, obviously, A&M played Creighton last year in one of the early tournaments, ended up beating them, I believe it was 77-73. Isaacs had 25 points. I think he had 5 3-pointers. He was destroying A&M. Obviously, the classic buzz ball came through at the end and got the job done. But you came away from that, and I think everybody came away going, man, this guy is something else, and he's going to end up, if he does hit the transfer portal market again, being one of the top-tier guards to go to a contending program. As we all know, he had initially transferred to Houston, which Milos Uzak, right?
Milos Uzan.
Uzan, yeah, was one of the top players in college basketball. Obviously, was a big part of Houston's run in the NCAA tournament last year. He was projected to leave. He's now coming back to Houston, where when Isaacs did commit to Houston, he was going to be his replacement. Obviously, just a plug and play type player. Obviously, with him coming back to the Cougars, Isaacs went back on the market thinking, you know what, I'm going to go find a contending team that I feel is going to get to the tournament next year where I can be the starting point guard on that team with a lot of talent around me, choosing the Aggies, which was a huge, huge get in my opinion.
It was incredible to wake up to, wasn't it?
Oh, it was.
I think the Aggie fans, especially the people who've been following basketball closely the past couple of weeks with Bucky McMillan being hired and all of his people working diligently, I think waking up to around, I think national media gets a hold of it around 7:30 a.m. that he had officially signed with A&M. And then shortly, maybe about 30 minutes after that, the NBA and people covering the NBA draft had announced that Milos Uzan was going back to Houston. So people may remember Pop Isaacs a lot more from Texas Tech more than Creighton. He was this really, really skilled guard who would, come back and forth, get a lot of the teammates involved, but you could not leave him open because he was that dangerous on the offensive side of the floor. When he eventually did transfer to Creighton and then out of Creighton after getting that season-ending leg injury, there was a whole lot of smoke of, okay, is Ole Miss in it? Is Miami in it? Because they were looking to rebuild a whole roster just like A&M was. But when the announcement of Milos Uzan to the draft, Houston had this hole to fill. So what better than to get someone who has the Power 4 or more level at Texas Tech, at Creighton, even with that season-ending leg injury. The baseline is there with Pop Isaacs. I mean, you said it yourself. It's people know this guy, especially being able to get the teammates involved. So when he eventually gets the word, hey, Uzan is coming back, A&M seems like a very, very viable option, especially because, hey, it's still not a fully put together roster. It's very, very close to being a finished product. Let me say that. But with someone like an Isaacs now, who's able to get the entire team involved, it actually helps out what Bucky's trying to do even more. He's trying to get up and down the court. He's trying to get all of his people who are shooters facilitated. Maybe not necessarily whoever the 5-man on the floor is at that time, but everybody else on that floor is going to be able to take a shot. And how are you able to get the ball to them as much as Isaacs might be able to do? I think that just unlocks another level for the A&M offense moving forward.
Yeah, and you said it perfectly, and that's the initial thought, because I did know they were still in the market. I think we both obviously knew they were still in the market for a starting point guard. I think some people assumed that Shakari Lane would take that position, but he is looked at more as a 6-man. I think kind of sharing that with Josh Holloway in that round, because he is a pure scorer. That's somebody, and he is a little smaller, and he does come from a smaller program. So you were looking for, you knew what you were going to get into him. That's like a pure bucket, as the kids say. It was always going to be up to McMillan to have to fight with these other big time programs in Miami, who has a lot of NIL money. They have prestige in the past. They haven't had good seasons recently, but this was a team that made it close to reaching the national championship only a couple seasons ago. Like they know how to acquire talent, and they know how to get guys from the transfer portal. And I'm going to be honest, when I saw that, it just shows when he committed, when he flipped his commitment, he automatically, like, because you think if you're at Houston and then you get that news that Milos is coming back, and you kind of think to yourself, okay, well, like you said, I've got Ole Miss, I've got Miami, I've got maybe Alabama or something like that. That, look what they've done in the tournament, like recently. Look at what they've done, over the last like 5 years. A&M has kind of been, kind of middle tier, and they've reached the NCAA tournament, but Buzz Williams is gone. So that identity is gone. And Bucky McMillan is this new guy, this offensive mind, this new age, young, hip coach who is going to use every player he's acquired correctly. And we've talked about on the show previously, guys like Zach Clements, who I told you one of my USA Today editors is a Kansas grad. And, he sent me a message immediately when Clements committed to A&M, and went, this guy's going to be really, really good in that system, because he just wasn't being used correctly based on the guys in front of him at Kansas. And not saying that's not going to be Pop Isaacs,
right.
We already know what he can do, right? But he's going to be that guy who's going to come in, be able to distribute, score at will. We already know what he can do from beyond the arc. We know that he's a very efficient guy in the paint. He's somebody who can make shots when needed, make shots in clutch time. We saw that during his career at Texas Tech. And we also know that when you get players, obviously when they got Riley and Griffin, that's going to help get other finishing pieces to this roster. So now, if you're an Aggie fan and you look at this roster, I just did an update for Aggies Wire tonight, actually. I think there's about 12 players on the roster right now. And when you look at it, you can fill out a starting 5 and have a lot of depth. But there are other areas. They may want to add another forward. They may probably want to add another guard just to have that solidified, and possibly another small forward, knowing that Riley Griffin is going to be at that spot.
Can you imagine if Rylan Kennedy was on?
He can probably play basketball.
He definitely can. I have it.
Those guys, they're such good athletes. But either way, it is just that next step. And I'm going to be honest, I love to see the reactions of people who maybe aren't the biggest basketball fans, because we do know that basketball is kind of tied for second with the A&M fan base. And it's going to get up there, though, with Bucky McMillan, in my humble opinion, just what he's going to do. And they're starting to look at this roster and go, I did not expect this. I didn't expect this level of talent. And when you look at talent discrepancy, this is the most talent Texas A&M basketball's had in my lifetime. I really believe. I mean, we go back to AC Law, and they had some really good teams, but that was a long time ago. In the Buzz Williams era, you had talent, but you also had a lot of very hardworking players that just weren't being played, and they fit Buzz Williams' defense, rebounding based system. But in terms of scoring, in terms of recruiting talent, that leads us to the huge news that Mackenzie Mgbako, who's participating in the NBA Combine over the last 2 weeks and was excelling at that. I mean, you, Jackson Callaway, others did a fantastic job with your updates of kind of telling the fan base and everybody else, and even those in the media, look, it's not like he's just going to go to the NBA draft now because he had a good 2 weeks. He's still pretty committed to what he sought out to do with Texas A&M next season, we get the news that he is withdrawn. Obviously, the withdrawal date was tomorrow. I think that was the final day.
Yeah.
He is withdrawn. He's coming to play for Texas A&M in 2025. And combined with Pop Isaacs, it couldn't have been a better day for Aggie fans in terms of basketball.
Exactly. So around 9:30 a.m., we get the word that he is withdrawing or taking his name out of NBA draft consideration. And I know a lot of people have been covering it for the past 3 weeks as all of these players have done their NBA combine workouts, their testing, everything like that. And Mackenzie was playing out of his mind, let's be honest, in those games. He was showcasing exactly why we saw in national media, scouts, everything like that, why he was a 5-star recruit in the first place with many, many sites, and why NBA draft boards kept shooting him up even before he was committed originally to Indiana. They really, really had high hopes for this guy, and he still has that. It's just that over the course of Indiana's misfortune, we'll call it, is that he kind of gets all of these players who had gone to Indiana, and it's no shade to what they did this past season, but they were kind of overshadowed. And as a team who doesn't get that recent success that you see maybe like players from Florida or players from not even like Duke, but Texas Tech. I mean, you saw it with Darian Williams, who has been a hot commodity in the portal, that Mackenzie, when I didn't think that when he came to A&M, that it was a fully, hey, 1 foot out the door kind of thing. Here's my backup option. I think he was trying to do what was best for his career. And if that was the NBA, then so be it. I think that if you were projected to have this early second round, late first round, I think by all means you should take it. But maybe that's just me. But when we saw original projections of him outside of the second round, and even talking with some people in draft circles and people who were covering the combine, I kind of asked them, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think? Because I'm interested in a lot of the NBA stuff behind the scenes as well. So I asked about the Penn State center who was tearing up the combine as well. I asked about, Mark Sears, who was absolutely lethal from three at the combine. But when I talked to these people about Mgbako, it was more like he has done amazing. They really wanted to see if another year in college could just shoot rocket ship him all the way up to a first round, potentially a late lottery pick. That's what their ceiling was for him. So I think when you put it all together of Bucky McMillan getting it done quickly as soon as he got here onto campus, they did their evaluations really fast and really effectively. And Mgbako is going to be, I don't want to say superstar because that's maybe just projecting too much, but he's going to be your either 1A out of 3 people now who are going into this A&M season as your like go-to scorers in this offense.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's we've been through this journey before, and we know it's the same with NFL. There's a lot of guys who honestly they just get bad opinions and evaluations in terms of maybe it's agents or somebody who knows what they can get paid as a first round pick, who just aren't ready to go yet. They need at least one more season. And I am glad that, scouts were honest. And I do credit NBA scouts have been very honest because they've seen a lot of guys just not pan out in the last 10 plus seasons where we see these top 5 picks who you forget who they were after a couple seasons because they get traded and then they just kind of disappear. And it's getting a little better. And there's a big focus on like the European market with some of these guys coming out. They're just more polished. They're playing at a high level at a younger age. So they're getting more prepared to come into the NBA and play. Obviously, we see guys like Luka Doncic leading the way, who started playing at I think he's like the age 15 or something at the pro level.
Yeah.
So it is a job for these college coaches like a Bucky McMillan, like a John Calipari, who has been known for during his time at Kentucky, sending guys too early, basically doing out of, I'm going to bring you here. I'm going to play you for a year or 2, and then I'm going to send you to the NBA draft. You're going to get paid, and whatever your future is, it is what it is. But I think in today's game, not only is the college game so exciting, so you want to see these guys come back, and you want to see these rosters in the transfer portal era, which is getting ridiculous, but it is what it is right now. So you're getting these brand new teams full of talent that look like A&M with all these great pieces around them. And that's why it is hard to look at the future and think this team's going to be this good, because we just don't know how they're going to mesh. That's the biggest thing, especially with McMillan's system. Are they all going to fit? Are they all going to, play up to his standards, et cetera? But at the same time, you just said he's 1A. Yeah. I mean, you look at guys like Pop Isaacs now, Mgbako, Federico, who would be, A&M starting center and a perfect fit in what they want to do there. Obviously, Rylan Griffin. Those are those star level players who we have seen them star already in college. So we know what they can do. And then the rest are a bunch of guys, the unknowns, that we feel they're perfect fits in the system that McMillan runs. But it is, and again, it's just very nice because there was always the chance that, someone was going to tell Mgbako, look, you could be a low first round pick, potentially, maybe a team really loved you, and you're going to get paid X amount of dollars, or maybe a high second round pick, and you can really tear it up in the G League to start and then make your way to league. But one more college year, you get to play in college, you get to have fun, you get to play in a fun system that you're going to love playing in, because you hear from every Sanford player who has played in McMillan's system, and even going back to his high school coaching days, you have fun. You love playing basketball in that system. And so you get one more year, you polish your skill set, you become a better three-point shooter, because you're going to be shooting threes at Texas A&M next year a lot.
Very many.
A lot. So he's going to get better in that area. He's going to shoot up his percentage. He's going to become a more efficient scorer in the paint. He's going to be a better rebounder. Everything's going to get better for him. And then when he goes into the process next summer, we're talking about a potential first round pick. And again, they're going to be looking at his recruit. They know what he can do now. He's helped himself already. That's the greatest thing about that.
He's established a baseline.
Exactly. So they already know. They've done their homework, and all those scouts you do now is just go to Texas A&M games and watch you thrive. And then one team's going to go, yep, I'm going to pick that guy. So
yeah, if I had to ask you, out of the players who we believe are most likely 1A, B, and C in Griffin, Isaacs, and Mgbako, who do you think off the top of your head takes that jump to, let's say, an all SEC level, whether it's first, second, or third team?
So I would say that Mgbako and Isaacs are probably tied right now. I think it's because of the urgency, right? Okay. It's the last season for both of them. They know that. And Isaacs, I think he's really determined to prove that his injury is not going to hinder him, because I mean, you go back to his recent games. I think he had 25 points against Kansas.
Yeah, he did.
Or 27. He was on a tangent, man. He was tearing it up, and he was becoming Creighton's best scorer. And I think he's seen the Mark Sears of the world, these guys that just come out of nowhere and just take over at the guard spot. Obviously extremely important in the SEC. Wade Taylor, God bless him. I love that kid, but the inconsistencies did hinder him, this season. He didn't step up to that level we thought he'd be. And look, that happens. It's basketball. Sometimes you have good years, sometimes you have bad. We're all hoping that he's going to have a great pro career and kind of find his shooting and become, a legitimate guy that can come off a bench and be a productive guy. But yeah, I would really say Isaacs, Mgbako, and Griffin right now, and then you can throw in a Jakari Lane and a couple other wild cards. Aggie from, I think it's Aggie or a G.
Either one.
He's another guy that you watch his tape from USC. He became. What's funny is McMillan is getting a lot of these guys who are just scoring machines,
exactly, having incredible percentages too.
Yeah, high percentage shooting. I think he was over 50-something%. I remember when he committed, he was kind of a wild card for me. I'd heard some whispers that there was a guy from USC, and I was like, well, I don't think it's Desmond Claude, but it's got to be someone else. And then you look at his stat line, you look what he can do, and you're going, oh, wow, okay, maybe he's thrown into that conversation of somebody who can surprise, come off the bench, and then end up being a starter at the end of the season. So it's just, I'm having fun. I'm smiling thinking about it because I get to cover this team, and it's just going to be more fun than I've ever had. Again, no offense to Buzz Williams covering A&M basketball, because it did get, you're kind of waiting for the tournament every year, because A&M would get in those losing streaks and they wouldn't improve in the areas they needed to. And then they'd find their way back with defense. That's not going to be the case now because you've got way too much offensive talent to get, to really get into elongated slumps unless you're playing like zero defense and you're playing teams that are going to score 100 on you
Exactly.
each night. So it's going to be very interesting. I think once this roster is complete, I don't know, you probably know more than I do in that aspect, if they're going to add, another guy of this type of star level to the roster. I would think right now it's probably going to be more depth type of guys. But yeah, I think I answered your question there is that Isaacs after today, based on, the games, I watched him a lot with Creighton before his injury last year. I watched him a lot with Texas Tech during his second season with them. He's the type of guy who can really become that Mark Sears type of level production guy that can really help you in the postseason.
Really, really good analysis. I've been watching Pop Isaacs for a while as well, especially when he was at Texas Tech. I didn't obviously we didn't get to see a lot of him at Creighton, and that sucked because I love watching good basketball, and Creighton was one of my guilty pleasure watches throughout the entire season. I loved Ryan Kalkbrenner a lot, so can't wait to see what he does at the next level. But with Mgbako, Isaacs, and Griffin, I think those guys, if A&M is able to come through these summer workouts and go into the fall with an established baseline of chemistry, that's the big thing for me right now is how are these 12 players going to gel together? Because the only player that has ever stayed here over the past couple of months has been Chris McDermott.
I'm sorry, I got a lot because we had Robert and Will on last week, and we were talking about the photo choice that ESPN used for the latest NCAA tournament projections.
Yes.
And again, Chris McDermott has become the hero of College Station. I mean, I have a story, maybe a 30 for 30 one day about Chris McDermott seeing all those players transfer. And he's just waiting pat going, I'm just going to see who they hire. He's the only one.
Houston's finest.
Oh, yeah. It's just all. And again, I think we're forgetting about Chris McDermott. I love that you brought that up because he's kind of turned into, sadly, the Terry Bussey for me. I've had a lot of people criticize because we haven't talked about Terry Bussey enough because he's just, he's been injured, but has nothing to do with how much we love Terry Bussey and how good we think he's going to be. It's just when you add all these transfers and stuff, you start to focus on them. You start to pinpoint like the Casey Concepciones of the world and stuff like that. So certain guys just get kind of put behind, and I hate doing it. It's kind of hilarious, but McDermott is one of those guys we did see, his skill set. He's a guy who I think has a high ceiling, especially in this system that, not because of his loyalty, they're not going to like say, here, you get to play because you stayed or something. Right. This isn't middle school, but he is somebody that I think can grow in this system too. I think especially fast-paced. He's a very efficient scorer inside. He's got size. He's very strong. He was really a Buzz Williams type of player, which was funny. I thought he was going to be the first guy to transfer to Maryland outside of, Pharrell Payne and Solomon Washington. So he must think that this is a better fit for his basketball career, which is kind of fun, very fun to think about. And I think we're going to obviously see that going forward when McMillan starts to recruit these high school players in the 26th class, that they're going to be very loyal to staying with this program, developing with McMillan's system. And it's not just going to be, I think, college athletics, we can get into that. It's just very different now. And it's not, unless you're a legacy, like we see with A&M sometimes with guys like Mike Brown committing and stuff like that, that unless it's like that, there's not a ton of loyalty. It's really what you can do for me to develop. And then you start to really, gain this trust with the coaching staff and your team. And that's how you want to stay with the program. And I think McMillan has that type of aura, to have that for the future and really build great classes moving forward and not just have to depend on the transfer portal.
Yeah, exactly. I think this first season, especially before we get into SEC games, is going to be a show me kind of couple of games. Mm-hmm. It's because as soon as we see that first game on the court, we're going to see exactly what they have been practicing, exactly what McMillan is trying to preach He plays fun, exciting basketball. They shoot a lot. They defend their butts off. They get in the passing lanes, which I compared it a lot earlier today, even to exactly how, like in the NBA, the Minnesota Timberwolves use their defensive scheme, where all these players kind of try and funnel their players down to the paint where Gobert is waiting, aka Federico in this style of play. That's what exactly it makes total sense in my mind. Now I don't know for sure if that's exactly what they're going to be playing, but it's what makes sense, especially with all the people that like to run, shoot, and get in these passing lanes. And like you said yourself, it's not exactly a finished product yet. I would like them to add maybe a three or four with a long wingspan who may not take a lot of threes, but can shoot it at a very, very high percentage. But with someone like that kind of filling out the roster, I really, really want to see how their chemistry develops. I know I saw Bucky McMillan give a few comments today on Mackenzie Mgbako withdrawing and kind of overall how he feels about him as a player, as a person, and he gave some really, really insightful comments to it. So if you see that floating around the web, for all my people watching, definitely check it out. McMillan always has not necessarily a laid back style of talking, but he's very, very sincere in what he says. I don't think you're ever going to get a like two-faced thing from him like you may see with other programs. I'm not going to name anybody specific because why? But with those comments, I think you can get very, very excited about what you're seeing year one.
Yeah, he spoke. He spoke today during the SEC meetings, and yeah, there's a sincerity to him there, and I think when it comes to kind of understanding culture, the NFL, for example, I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan, obviously, so it's like there's this whole thing with Schottenheimer, and how different is the culture, with Mike McCarthy gone, right? How what's going to change? And, we've seen teams that maybe their culture doesn't seem that great. I think the Philadelphia Eagles, for example, there's that A.J. Brown, he's reading a book on the sidelines and, then he's saying the offense sucks. And then that team that has bad culture goes and wins the Super Bowl. So there's a discussion of, do you really need great culture to be a winning program? Yes and no, because if you do have programs, even in basketball, that are just super elite at every position and their scheme just works and guys are very committed to playing at a high level, not just to improve their draft stock, but to win a championship, and they're very locked in, then I think you're fine. You're going to win a lot of games. But we look at Florida, for example. I would say that based on a bunch of smaller school guys coming together, proving their worth, thinking, we're good enough to not just hang in the SEC, but to make it extremely deep in the NCAA tournament and win a championship, which they did. And they did it, as this rough and tough, great offensive team, but they had to play excellent defense. They had to will a comeback against Houston. That's that type of fortitude and culture that wins you titles. So
exactly,
if you listen to McMillan, and that's part of my job as a journalist, is that when you listen to coaches talk, you kind of you want to read into the kind of person they are and what they're going to bring to a team. And I would say that McMillan, he's kind of he's got his head kind of turned like this, and he's got a smile on his face, and he's only like 10 years, maybe 9 years older than I am. So he's not, I understand that he's, on to the next job in terms of, I'm going to do everything I can to make Texas A&M, as he said in his introductory press conference, a championship level program starting from the bottom up, which means getting players that not just fit the system, but are very talented, but want to play for Texas A&M, want to play in my system, want to commit to my system. And I think the sincerity he had talking about Mgbako, he knows what kind of person Mgbako is outside of the player he is. He knew the entire time before we did that he was coming back, right? He knew that. Like I guarantee those two talked and said, look, coach, I'm going to play this out. I'm going to, impress scouts. I'm going to get some film for them. And then I'm going to announce my comeback and going to be ready for the summer to work out, get ready for 2025.
Yeah, I can't wait, man. I can't wait.
It's going to be awesome. And he is one of those coaches that if you are an Aggie fan, you're kind of down on some of the coaches in this program, which we're about to get to right now, Bucky McMillan is the real deal. He's as, he's as real as it gets in terms of just a basketball junkie and a guy who wants to develop players and win basketball games. And that's the new age of these young coaches coming up. So I think we've talked about basketball as much as we can right now. Obviously, we're going to get even more news coming forward. And obviously, when we go into the summer, the best part of the year is when we start to get those workout clips. And it's going to be very fun to see these guys in McMillan's system running up and down the court, sweating their butts off and shooting a lot. We're going to go. So SEC meetings in Destin, Florida over this week. I've actually never been to these. It's kind of funny. Some national media guys go there and, go on Paul Feinbaum and talk about the team. There's a couple, and it's fine. But mainly what you get out of it, you get these little tidbits of information from football, basketball, and every athletic director there. So going into the 2025 football season, we're just going to talk briefly about this. Mike Elko, he spoke today, and like every coach, I think Kirby Smart was the most electric, talking about the transfer portal and going the winter portals, ruining college football, and he's always the most fiery, and mainly it's because he's won a lot and he's kind of the king of the castle right now. And then you got guys like Sarkisian, who's more laid back and really talking about like the playoff model. That's a big discussion right now. Automatic bids, what so have you. And, Mike Elko, the biggest off-season questions for him had to do with, how's this team going to rebound after a 1-4 finish? Because we talked about on the show last week at length, looking at the schedule, looking at, what they've done in the offseason, obviously the 14 transfer portal additions, but nothing comes close to the health of senior running back Le'Veon Moss. You and I had talked about this previously. And there's a sect of the fan base who's very skeptical of him being 100% healthy, no matter how many times the coaching staff and the man himself has said he's 100% healthy. They feel like, we've seen this movie before. These guys say they're healthy and they go into fall camp and they think they have a setback and then they're not playing the first 2 games and they just don't look the same. That's not the case. It goes back to Pro Football Focus put a tweet out there talking about Le'Veon Moss and being a 2026 NFL draft prospect. And they were talking about, if he's 100%, we're going to see, one of the best backs in the country. And then Le'Veon Moss, who's probably getting sick of people thinking he was injured still, went out there and said, look, I am 100%. And today, and in the Brazos country, press conference, coaches night press conference, Mike Elko has now said twice, because he keeps being asked by this. And look, that's the media's job. He said today, Le'Veon Moss is 100%, and more importantly, he said he's looking really good out there. He's cutting. He's got his power back. He's got his burst back. We all know, watching Moss last season, that he was the cornerstone of that offense. Like how well he was doing is how well the offense is going to do. How well he was doing is how well Marcel Reed is going to do, because it's going to give him confidence. He's going to, the Arkansas game was a great example of that. And I'll let you speak here. But Marcel Reed had to make the passes at the end of that game. It was one of his worst games. Moss had this huge run at the end to really seal the deal. But when he did that, it helped Marcel Reed. It helped him get back into that mental zone of, okay, I got to make these. I got to hit my receivers now. I got to get into either field goal range or we got to get a touchdown. And it's that symbiotic relationship that's going to be extremely important. No matter how much Marcel Reed improves next season as a passer, he's going to need that running game to be as good or better next season.
Definitely going to need to be better. Especially after, and I know one of the other comments that I listened to intently after hearing about the SEC meetings was, well, how are you going to adjust after that 1-4 record in the last 5 games of the season last year? And he said, and Michael goes very straight up. He's like, hey, we had to adjust to some things we weren't ready on. Mm-hmm. That straight up. That's how we phrased it. We had a couple of back-to-back road games, just a whole lot of things that they weren't prepared on. And
Yeah, I have the quote. I have the quote right here actually, and then
yeah, go ahead.
Get your thoughts on it. So he was asked, basically and what I started with, just the collapse. Just that this team lost their identity. They looked like the flip script in the worst ways after the South Carolina blowout, where actually they were tied, I think 20-all at one point, and then it just went to hell for them. And that was when Le'Veon Moss went down for the year. But he said, yeah, it was a lot of things. One, we were in a situation we haven't been in before. We played back-to-back night games on the road in the SEC as the team that was being hunted. I don't know that we handled that well. That's received a lot of criticism from some outside people of saying, well, you're the coach, you're supposed to know how to handle it. I'm going to give him some grace here. He had a new coaching staff. He had a team that that 7-1 start was a surprise. We have to remember that. You go back into LSU when LSU was up 17-3 or 17-7, completely physically outplaying A&M. Connor Wegman was struggling. He went in the second half, inserted Marcel Reed. The run game got going. They ended up blowing him out 38-23. And that was kind of maybe A&M is for real type of game. But again, I'm not going to say it was a fluke, but it was just something that just kind of happened. He took a risk. It worked. Obviously, Colin Klein's play calling at that time worked. But this is the type of situation where you learn from your mistakes after year one. Every coach in the SEC has done it, including Steve Sarkisian. For Texas fans kind of living in a fantasy land that believes that those first 3 years weren't, didn't exist or something. He had to go through the ups and downs of Big 12 play. And yes, when he got in the SEC, he just had such a good veteran, talented team that they made the run. We don't know until we know.
Exactly.
So that's really what he meant, is that I'm going to learn from my mistakes this season.
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, when he said that they were being hunted, that is a valid point. I mean, at that point, they were 7-1 before the last 5 games of that year, and hunted in the terms of, hey, they are tied for the first position in the SEC right now. So there is a target on your back when you're doing that well. Every single team has had that happen to them when they're tied for first or first place solely. People are looking out for you. People are planning to attack you in a different way. So how are they going to adjust? We won't know until we know, like you said. So I'm really, really interested to see if these first 2 games before Notre Dame, what exactly did they do this offseason to adjust so that if they're ever in a situation like that, how prepared are they to, maybe you are down going into halftime, maybe you're down by 2 scores. How do you adjust so that you can get your team on the right headspace and on the same level together as a team so that you can overcome that and it ends up pulling out a win on that football field? Because last year it was not perfect at all. It was quite honestly tragic to see how the defense was the last, I'm not going to say 5 games, we'll say 4 games of that season, because Elko said it himself. It was awful to watch after that bowl game, and their changes needed to be made. He knew that going into this offseason. He has taken it by the reins. So I think that once we get out of these summer OTAs, we'll call it, that colleges now can do, what is going to be the toughness, the grit, the mentality, the grind of this A&M team going into that first game? Buddy, your mic's off.
Come to that point of the show where my mic is off. It's the mental aspect. It's very interesting to me because everybody's against A&M. I'm not just talking about Texas fans who live for, piling on and acting like, Arch Manning's going to win them a title just automatically without any work or something like that. But I'm talking about everybody else who has seen A&M become that 8 wins, 7 wins type of program. It's not, there's nobody in favor of A&M right now. Like, national media will give them their flowers, and there's a lot like ESPN and Fox and others who have said, you look at the roster, it's good enough to be a 9, maybe a 10-win team. We've had other analysts who've said, yeah, I mean, they're good enough. That's fine if you think you're good enough. but what are you going to do in the next couple of months to become that team that when you're down 20-14 with 5 minutes left and possession, what plays are you going to draw up? What are you going to focus on? What is your identity in the first 2 games? How are you going to face UTSA and Utah State? Are you going to just, try to be a balanced offense? Or are you going to rest on your laurels like you did most of the end of the season, thinking that maybe something will happen? Or are you going to change things when you have to? It's just, and one of the biggest things is, Marcel Reed's development as a passer is obviously the talking point that's going to head into fall. And I understand that, because if you don't have a guy who's excellent in the throw game, and I mean going to make those tough passes when needed, your offense really is non-existent, because you can run the ball as much as you want. And yes, some are going to have trouble against it. And that's why I can see them going into the season wanting to utilize their deep running back group and just run as much as possible and focus on that as a strength to get through those first 2 games and then mix it up against Notre Dame. I think that would be a mistake. I think you have to play the way you're going to play at Notre Dame against those first 2 teams. You have to get Marcel Reed confident and using those weapons he has in the passing game now. You have to figure out how we're going to utilize all that speed we have now, because we know that Casey Concepcion is going to be our number 1. We know that Terry Bussey's going to be healthy at the time. How do we really utilize him as a wide receiver full time now? And then we have all these other guys. We have Mari Nyblack at tight end. We have all these weapons, but how are we going to use them? How are we going to kind of hide them and then trick defense, trick secondaries? And, there's so much that they can do, because they finally have the roster to mix things up. They don't have to go in to a season thinking, well, we have so many weaknesses in this area, so we have to kind of cover them up. That's not the case anymore. So I just really want to see, are you going to be like a Texas or an Alabama who is proud of the talent you have and knows how to use it? And are you going to be an actual threat and somebody that other teams fear? Because right now that's not the case. And until we start the season, until they play Notre Dame, I think that, we talked about it last week, I think that they have to beat Notre Dame on the road to gain that national respect back and gain that respect from the SEC back that, okay, maybe this team is an actual contender.
Yeah, for sure. I think you said it perfectly, that national respect isn't going to be there again to get rid of the narrative of, oh, they're going to go XYZ record every single season or worse. I mean, more power to A&M right now. You can go up all you want right now. It is solely up to you, though. You're not going to get gifted anything. You're not going to hand it anything on that football field whatsoever. I think that the offense, with the running back room that it has, is going to be the best we've probably seen it in recent years. The entire running back room there, I have such high expectations for that running back room, up to the point of, I think they're probably A&M probably will have the chance to be the best ground game in the SEC this year. So when you get up to that Notre Dame game, you're going up against a first-year starter in CJ Carr, but that's not the only thing. Their defense, from what I've heard out of their spring camps, their defensive staff loves their defense even more than they just had this past year. And they just had multiple people go off to that NFL draft. But they think that their defense is one of the best, if not the best, in the entire country right now. So how are you going to be able to attack that as a team and not get discouraged when things don't go your way? Now, Elko has taught, hey, put your head down, work. But now if somebody like a Notre Dame comes in, or you go to them where it messes with that work, can you lift your head up and pretty much smack them away?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's kind of funny because you look at the schedule and you look at, we're pretty early, so we don't really know how good certain defenses are going to be. I know that a lot of staffs love their defense. I keep hearing how much Auburn thinks their defense is better than their offense, even though they have two of the best wide receivers. Granted, they have a quarterback who really hasn't lived up to his recruiting potential. And if that is the case, though, A&M is going to be playing some of the best defenses all season throughout the SEC. So that's what hinges on the offense. And this is a huge year for Colin Klein, because there's no more bandage of, oh, well, it's just your first year. We've got next year for you to improve. No, it's do or die, because we've already seen Elko make changes when things weren't going well. I mean, you look at the Lyle Hemphill addition. That was not, hey, Jay Bateman, you did a decent job, and we'll give you another chance. Like, don't worry. No, it was a demotion, and it was bringing in a young guy who at James Madison last year, I think he had a top 15 defense and one of the better secondaries. And he's one of those young up-and-coming coaches who knows that I'm going to come into your Texas A&M program and potentially be the problem solver for all the issues with blown coverages last season that killed him against Auburn and Texas and USC and a couple other, and South Carolina. And that's where I give Elko credit, because look, I know that there are some people who just want coaching staffs to fire everybody and start. That doesn't happen. That's never going to happen. And if it does happen, it's a very random occurrence. It doesn't happen all the time. But he did make the necessary changes because he knows, and he had talked about this during the Brazos Coaches Night, that he's very proud of his team, that they've all really stuck together. They barely lost anybody in the transfer portal. Basically, their entire defense, outside of obviously the 3 defensive linemen who went to the NFL draft, are coming back. They've got 14 additions, a ton of talent coming in at edge. They've got Tyler Onyenum at defensive tackle, who I think is going to be a star next season. And they feel very confident in what they have. And I know that because of the way they finished, that bad taste is not going to come out of people's mouths anytime soon until they start winning games. But look, it's our job to obviously report it and tell you about it. But I think that Elko will see during the rest of the summer, and when he starts to continues to take podiums, this is a guy who knows how critical this season is, not just for his tenure, but it's for A&M's future, both recruiting, portal additions, general respect, all those things. Because again, they haven't made a college football playoff since its inception. They got close in 2020 with Jimbo Fisher, which obviously led to the disaster of extending him and stuff. So it's always a laughing stock with A&M right now. So it's his job to get them back to respect. Not just national respect is what it is, but respect from the SEC, respect from the fan base of thinking, because you do see it's another 7-5 season. I see it all the time. And I'm going, look, I get you're being negative, and it's just the way it is. But you got to play the games, you got to watch the games, and you got to see notable improvements. And that's the hope for next season. We're going to move on to baseball, which I don't think we need to spend a ton of time on. But Trev Alberts, Texas A&M's athletic director, did speak today. Obviously, to preface, Texas A&M did not make the NCAA tournament. Shocking. They weren't even a team like in the first 4 out or something, which really
did not even expect them to be in the first 4 out.
Yeah.
So I saw a lot of expectations seeing, hey, maybe we are in there. I think it probably would have been a little bit more pain on top of that if that had happened.
And again, the worst part of it, and if you have apathy towards that, I get it. Like, the worst part is that if they would have swept Missouri instead of the other way around, we're talking about a team that's probably in the NCAA tournament right now. So it was horrible. I can't even talk about that series anymore because it was just confusing. I have no answers. I don't get it.
Yeah.
And it all falls on the feet of Michael Early. Obviously, we entered the week not really knowing what was going on. Kendall Rogers of D1 Baseball, he was actually responding to someone on X. It was kind of interesting that he would have that response in the public like that. He basically told this A&M fan, I don't expect them to stay pat, basically, concerning Early's future. And maybe that meant that they had hired somebody already and they're just kind of waiting to go through the process. But Trev Alberts spoke today at the meetings and had a lot to say, and just talking about the college football landscape and obviously the playoff structure and stuff like that. But he did talk about Early's future with A&M, and he kept it very business-like, which we've talked pre-show about, that upsets some of the fan base, but others understand it. That he said, look, I'm going to evaluate what Early's done. I'm going to really look through this entire season, all the ups and all the downs, and again, this is a first-year head coach that his buyout right now would be about $3 million, which for buyouts, that's not a lot. And that is something that you could really move on pretty quickly, especially for a financially sound institution like Texas A&M. But tell me what you thought about his comments. I just took it as this is what most ADs do 2 days after a season officially ends. They're not, unless it was so bad that you just had to pull the trigger and maybe you had someone in mind that you were going to get in here. But, my personal opinion, some guys are locked up with their other programs. Maybe there were some guys that they wanted last season before early kind of stepped up and the whole player retention thing became popular that they wanted. And now they're locked up. But yeah, tell me your thoughts on that.
So what's interesting is that I agree with you when it comes to, hey, the AD said exactly what he's supposed to say, because what did you expect? Did you expect him to answer saying, hey, we're keeping him, or hey, we're firing him, or anything regarding to the future of something without discussing internally with donors, with people on boards, with his own athletic department? I don't think people quite understood just the amount of time and effort firstly went into trying to find early in the first place last year, having to scramble around for it. But also now this year, they are already meeting with trying to discuss the future. He said it himself. They have to evaluate every single option going forward, because it's very, very delicate when it comes to this. Do they want to keep these players and retain them? Because let's be honest, if he comes back, these players will come back. Is it going to be where they let him go? Or is something where Kendall Rogers said is true, where I don't expect A&M to stay pat? I kind of interpreted that as I don't expect A&M to do absolutely nothing. So whether that means a firing on the coaching staff or a little bit of pressure here and there, I'm not 100% sure. But when it comes to baseball being this program now that I know a lot of fans will actually have it above football and basketball, they love baseball at A&M. So they're very passionate about it. I think the fan interaction I saw on various social media websites was kind of split. People were vouching for Early to keep his job another year. Other people were calling for him to be fired. Maybe that's because they saw, hey, either the Missouri series or other series where it's like, come on, you had this roster, you could have done X, Y, and Z with it. So it's very, very hard to evaluate even now. I think it was hard to evaluate during the season because you could either chalk it up to one reason or another as to why maybe a team lost. But now you had that renown of a top-ranked team going into the entire baseball season, but now those expectations from the national media are coming back to haunt you, where you have all these talented players, you have these players on your roster who donors are spending their money on, and it didn't go anywhere near of what people thought it was going to. So it's going to be a hard decision overall. Whether that comes in the next few days, I would probably say so. I don't think it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. And for fans to either be, 50-50 on it, I think you just need to take what you're hearing on social media sites right now, besides actual people who write content like you or other people who are evaluating all the options just like the athletic department is. You got to take what other people on social media are saying with a grain of salt.
Yeah, it's all opinion based, and we saw that obviously when Jimbo Fisher was fired. I never forget that day. I woke up at 6 a.m. or something hearing about it, and it was a shock. It was really a shock. We didn't hear much of anything. I think the only guy was Billy Lucci at Texas Aggies that really knew anything, and he was kind of gatekeeping it that way. And then he got a lot of criticism of, well, if you knew, why did you act like he was going to be in his? It's one of those things where I don't know. We just don't know. I think a lot of people think we know. We think we can talk to anybody, but Kendall Rogers isn't the say-all of information. He'll tell you that. The funny thing is, I do love that he had to basically tell people, I graduated from Texas A&M, right? So I'm really not biased because I managed D1 baseball. I'm just telling you how it is. I don't have any hatred towards them, but I'm also not going to treat them like my buddy. And he's 100% right with that. If he's hearing things that we aren't, and like you said, if they're making moves, could that mean they're telling Early to fire his coaching staff and move on from Caleb Longley and Jason Kelly and who else, and say, look, they were the reason why they couldn't hit the ball. They were the reason why the bullpen struggled early in the season. They were the reason why these guys didn't reach their potential, which could be accurate, right? But then there's this other sect of the fan base, like you said, of it all stops with the head coach. It's all their fault. They are the head coach, so if the team loses, they get the blame. It never made sense to me because it's the same as a CEO of a company, that if you are a CEO of a company, yes, do you make the biggest decisions that alter the company's future? Yes, you do. But all at the same time, you need all those employees below you to do their job, but the company's not going to stay alive. And so that's the same thing with being a head coach, is that we were talking about with Mike Elko. Yes, the buck stops with Mike Elko, but this season's more important for, as I just previously said, Colin Klein, because Colin Klein was a budding offensive play caller that a lot of fans did not like last season, wanted him fired at the end of the year. That was never going to happen. But fan base is always going to shift every season based on how a team is struggling. And I said this, look, not everybody agrees with me. Bringing Early back would not be some huge disappointment or whatever. It's not my job to be disappointed. But at the same time, I could see an avenue that works where you basically tell them you need a new staff. Yes, you're going to retain your players, and that's great. You need to also get some new guys to replace outgoing guys, potentially like Jason Lavalette, Wyatt Hensler, etc. And, if you get some young up-and-coming assistant coaches, especially a hitting coach, you're going to see improvement likely. I mean, that's what we've seen with a lot of staffs, is that, he's also a first-year head coach. So you knew the lumps were coming. He had never done this before. He's 37 years old. Let me say again, he's 6 years older than me, which is weird because usually these guys are 30 years older than me because they've been coaching since 1992 or something. They've been doing it so long when they were getting paid nothing. Now these guys are getting paid more, so there's more pressure on them to produce now. So there's a discussion there of, well, don't you just give him a second chance automatically because it's 1 year? It's the same with Elko, right? Were you going to fire Elko because they finished 1-4? Were you going to basically say, you know what, we don't believe in you. You're gone. Let's go get is Nick Saban available? No, that's not how it works. So there is some grace that needs to go with these coaches. But I do get the discussion of maybe he was never the right fit. Maybe he was just a hire that was based on, we want to keep our stars, especially Lavalette and the pitching staff and Ryan Prager coming back. And they saw that all these guys voiced their opinion on social media saying that if you hire Early, we're going to come back. And that just led to this hire. It was a risk, but it could be a big risk, big reward situation. It didn't turn out to be that way. First number 1 overall ranked preseason team to miss the NCAA tournament since, I believe, 1991. So that does not go in his favor. And when you are evaluating him, all that's on the table. So they're going to go back and look at, you beat when you scored 17 runs against Tennessee and you won that series, when you won the series on the road against Arkansas, all these top seeds, right, in the NCAA tournament, as we see. And then you're going to see the lowest of lows, and you're really going to focus on the Missouri series. And you're going to ask him straight up, if I was Trev Alberts, I go, what happened there? Seriously, what happened there? I want to know what happened, because you had just beaten LSU, who was another team that could win the championship this year, 2 out of 3 games. You stepped up, you had clutch hits, and then you go into the next weekend and you lay the biggest egg we have seen for Texas A&M since the Appalachian State loss, in my opinion.
Yeah, so, definitely a goose egg there.
Exactly. So you gotta go through all that. You gotta look at it. You gotta evaluate, and then if you want to move on, you better have someone in place. You better have a big name, because I was talking to Robert Berenson and Will Stone last week. Their opinion was different than mine. Of you just need to get a bigger name and a more experienced name, because this program is too important to screw up right now. And I get that. And like you said, it's tied up there. It's tied up there with football right now. Like the love for Texas A&M baseball, the money that's gone into it, the fanfare, the dedication is there. So are you going to make half the fan base really mad by just telling them, look, we're going to bring him back, which some will be happy because of the player retention, but others will not be. It's very confusing right now, but we will most likely, from what I've heard, get a decision of either this week or next week. Very soon.
Very soon. I mean, if a lot of coaching staffs fired their head coach after the first or second year after being less than average, I feel like Kyle Whittingham would have been the undisputed greatest of all time coach ever.
That is very true.
I feel like we would have seen a national powerhouse over at Utah.
It's just funny to me because we live in a completely different time where, and that's, it's happened a lot, but yeah, second chances are hard to come by the fan base, and when the AD doesn't do what you want, automatically that AD is bad and you need to do AD. So I just say Ross Bjork, Trev Alberts, very different in their approach. Obviously you go back to the almost hiring Mark Stoops, which in my opinion would have been a disaster. That was a really bad decision by Ross Bjork and probably could have lost his job over it because it did lead to obviously hiring Mike Elko, but it was a potential huge mistake. But so far, you can criticize Trev Alberts for A, B, and C. You cannot like the way he does business. Maybe you don't like the way he talks, because I know a lot of people, it's just the way he's very professional and businesslike, and this is what we're going to do. And it's like, look, if you don't like that, that's fine. You're not going to like him anyways. But he hired Bucky McMillan, which was a risky hire, which we heard, Chris Beard is all these big names, but he went with the guy who he believed in. And that's the same reason he went with Michael Early. We have to remember that. So if he believes in Michael Early, he's probably going to stay with Michael Early, and they're not going to like that. But it's just how it works with being an athletic director. There is a theory that there's pressure from the fan base, especially when money talks, right? That we want changes, we want them now. But at the same time, I can tell you by the comments, by the people who email me every time we do an article about Early or something, it is literally 50-50, 60-40 in favor of Early right now.
Yeah, it's very, very close when it comes to the fan base.
Very close. It is dead. I mean, it's crazy because I didn't think that was going to be the case. I thought that the way that it ended and the way they fought in the SEC tournament and then obviously lost to LSU and then knowing that they weren't even a team included in the first whatever it was, that I thought it was going to be completely negative towards Early. But again, this is how the fan base works. You got older Aggies, you got younger Aggies, you got middle-aged Aggies who millennials and Gen Z and baby boomers, all of them have different opinions. So it's going to be very interesting. We're going to end with that today. Yeah. We've been talking for over an hour and 3 minutes right now.
Hey, I just want to remind all of our people who are watching, the sole purpose of the AD is to help the athletics entirety progress.
Exactly.
So Trev Alberts is doing what he thinks is absolutely the best, whether that is certain programs that, with new legislature coming out in the coming months, what things are needed to be reassessed, what things are needed to be improved on. So he is looking at it from a holistic perspective, whether it comes to business or anything like that. That's why A&M hired him in the first place.
We actually can mention, yes, the House settlement concerning NIL, concerning really affecting every team in the country they've not made a decision yet. That they did do some discussions today at the meetings. That's the reason why you have a Trev Alberts in there. That's the thing. Yes. That is going to affect every school financially in the way that they can hand out NIL payments and the way they can do things, recruiting, roster allotment, all those things are going to be affected. So again, have your opinion about him, talk about coaching changes. You're going to get a decision made, whether Early returns or he's fired, and then you're going to have to go search for another head coach for Texas A&M baseball. But it's going to be very interesting next week. I would say I'm just glad we could talk about this today, Cannon. You were awesome as usual. Obviously, follow Cannon at Torres Cannon on X. I'm at Cameron Honesty, obviously managing editor at Aggies Wire. As you know, we're doing constant updates, and we will be doing constant updates whenever a decision is made. regarding Early's future. Thank you for watching. We'll be back next week for episode 9. And don't know who our guest was. It could be Cannon. We don't know yet.
Yeah, come back next week and find out, guys.
We're always throwing stuff out there. So as always, thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Gig 'em, and we'll see you next Tuesday.